Girl ruins her mother's wedding and reveals a shocking truth about the groom. A young girl, Chloe, overhears her soon-to-be stepfather, Robert, plotting something sinister involving her mother, Jessica. Chloe tries to warn her mother, but Jessica dismisses her concerns. On the wedding day, Chloe interrupts the ceremony, revealing Robert's scheme, leading to a dramatic confrontation and the unveiling of a much larger deception. Sunlight, sharp and insistent, sliced through the gaps in the curtains, painting stripes across Jessica Brooks' face. She stirred, the lingering remnants of a dream clinging to the edges of her consciousness, a dream of white dresses, smiling faces, and a future bathed in golden light. Today was her wedding day. A flutter of anticipation, fragile as a butterfly's wing, brushed against the growing knot of unease in her stomach. Downstairs, the estate buzzed with the orchestrated chaos of final preparations. The faint scent of lilies, heavy and sweet, drifted up from the garden, mingling with the distant clatter of china and the hushed murmur of voices. Jessica rose, the silk of her robe cool against her skin, a stark contrast to the nervous heat that prickled at her fingertips. She glanced at the framed photo on her nightstand, her late husband, his eyes kind and gentle, his smile a bittersweet reminder of a love lost too soon. A pang of guilt, sharp and sudden, pierced through her anticipation. Was she betraying his memory by embracing this new happiness, this new future with Robert? A soft knock at the door. Chloe, her 7-year-old daughter, stood in the doorway, her small frame swallowed by the oversized lavender dress she would wear as a flower girl. But her eyes, usually bright and inquisitive, were clouded with a shadow that Jessica couldn't decipher. "Mama," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "are you happy?" The question, so simple yet so weighted, caught Jessica off guard. "Of course, sweetheart," she replied, forcing a brightness into her voice that she didn't quite feel. "Today's a special day." Chloe's gaze remained fixed on her, unwavering, unsettling. "I don't like him, Mama," she said, her voice a low murmur, barely audible above the rising hum of activity from downstairs. "He's pretending." A wave of irritation, swift and sharp, washed over Jessica. "Chloe, we've talked about this," she said, her voice tight with impatience. "Robert loves us. You'll see." But Chloe's words, small and quiet as they were, lodged themselves in Jessica's mind, a persistent splinter of doubt against the backdrop of her carefully constructed joy. The rehearsal dinner shimmered under a canopy of twinkling fairy lights, the air thick with the scent of jasmine and the murmur of polite conversation. Robert, radiating charm, held court at the head of the table, his laughter booming, his hand resting possessively on Jessica's. To the assembled guests, they were the picture of happiness, a couple embarking on a new chapter, their love story a fairy tale unfolding before their eyes. But Chloe, seated at the children's table, felt a growing unease, a cold knot tightening in her stomach. Robert's jovial facade felt wrong. His smiles didn't reach his eyes, his gestures felt too practiced, too performative. She watched him, her gaze fixed on the subtle twitch of his lips, the forced brightness in his eyes, and the chilling certainty grew within her, he was hiding something. Later, as the guests mingled on the terrace, Chloe slipped away, drawn by an inexplicable pull towards Robert's study. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of light spilling into the dimly lit hallway. She hesitated, her heart pounding against her ribs, a sense of foreboding washing over her. Then, a voice, sharp and cold, sliced through the quiet of the night. Robert, his tone stripped of its usual charm, spoke into his phone, his words a chilling whisper that sent a shiver down Chloe's spine. "Tomorrow, after she signs, no complications. She won't suspect a thing." A pause, then a low, chilling chuckle. "The kid? A nuisance. Nobody listens to children." Chloe's breath caught in her throat, the pieces of her unease clicking into place, forming a terrifying picture. Robert was lying. He was using her mother. And tomorrow, he planned to do something terrible. The fear, raw and primal, pulsed through her veins, urging her to act. She turned and ran, her small feet pounding against the stone path, the cold night air whipping against her face, carrying the weight of her terrifying discovery. She had to warn her mother. She had to make her listen before it was too late. The wedding morning dawned, a vibrant tapestry of sunshine and celebration. But for Jessica, the joy felt brittle, a thin veneer over the growing unease that Chloe's words had ignited. She tried to dismiss it, to attribute it to pre-wedding jitters, but the seed of doubt had been planted, and it was taking root. As she dressed, her reflection shimmering in the soft light, the memory of Chloe's words echoed in her mind, a persistent whisper against the backdrop of celebratory preparations. "He's pretending, Mama." She pushed the thought away, forcing herself to focus on the task at hand, on the meticulously planned details of her perfect day. Michael, her oldest friend, arrived, his concern evident beneath his cheerful facade. He caught her staring out the window, a troubled frown creasing her brow. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked gently. Jessica hesitated, her loyalty to Robert warring with the gnawing unease in her heart. "It's Chloe," she confided, her voice laced with a mixture of frustration and worry. "She's still saying things about Robert, unsettling things." Michael's expression turned serious. "What kind of things?" Jessica waved a dismissive hand. "Childish nonsense. She says he's pretending that he doesn't care about us." Michael's gaze was steady, unwavering. "Jessica," he said softly, "sometimes children see things we miss. Don't dismiss her so quickly." His words struck a chord, resonating with the unease that had been simmering within her. She wanted to believe him, to trust her instincts, but the thought of confronting Robert, of questioning the foundation of her happiness, filled her with a paralyzing fear. She pushed the doubt away, forcing a smile. "I'm sure it's nothing," she said, her voice a little too bright. "Just pre-wedding jitters." But as the morning progressed, the knot in her stomach tightened. Chloe's withdrawn silence and her haunted eyes were a constant reminder of the whispered accusations, a persistent counterpoint to the celebratory atmosphere. During a quiet moment, as Jessica adjusted her veil, Chloe approached, her small hand clutching a crumpled drawing. "Mama," she whispered, her voice trembling, "I drew this for you." Jessica knelt, taking the drawing from Chloe's outstretched hand. It was a crude but vivid depiction of a wolf in sheep's clothing, its sharp teeth bared in a menacing grin. A cold dread washed over Jessica, a chilling premonition that Chloe's fears were more than just childish fantasies. She looked at her daughter, her heart aching with a mixture of love and fear. "Chloe," she whispered, her voice trembling, "what are you trying to tell me?" Chloe's eyes, wide and dark with unspoken fear, met hers. "He's not who you think he is, Mama," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the rising strains of the wedding march. "Please, don't marry him." The weight of Chloe's words, coupled with the chilling image of the wolf in sheep's clothing, finally broke through Jessica's denial. A wave of nausea washed over her, the carefully constructed facade of her perfect day crumbling around her. She looked towards the garden, where the guests were assembled, where Robert stood waiting at the altar, his smile radiating charm and devotion. But now, beneath that carefully crafted facade, Jessica saw something else, something dark and sinister. The knot in her stomach tightened, a cold dread spreading through her veins. She had to know the truth. The wedding march swelled, its triumphant notes echoing through the garden, signaling the bride's arrival. But as Jessica stood at the entrance, her hand trembling on Michael's arm, a chilling certainty gripped her. She couldn't do this. She couldn't walk down that aisle, couldn't commit her life, her daughter's life, to a man she no longer trusted. She looked at Michael, her eyes pleading for guidance, for strength. He met her gaze, his expression a mixture of concern and resolve. "What is it, Jessica?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the music. I can't," she choked out, her voice trembling with a mixture of fear and uncertainty. "I don't know what to do." Michael's grip on her arm tightened. "Listen to your heart, Jessica," he said, his voice firm and reassuring. "Listen to your daughter." His words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within her, a beacon of clarity in the swirling chaos of her emotions. She looked towards the altar, where Robert stood waiting, his smile fixed and unwavering. And in that moment, the decision solidified within her, a surge of resolve replacing the crippling fear. She took a deep breath, her voice clear and steady. I need to talk to Chloe, she said, her gaze fixed on her daughter, who stood at the edge of the crowd, her small frame trembling, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. Michael nodded, his gaze filled with unspoken support. Go, he said softly. I'll handle things here. As Jessica turned towards her daughter, a wave of relief washed over her, the weight of her uncertainty lifting, replaced by a new sense of purpose. She would listen to her daughter, she would find the truth, and she would protect them both, no matter the cost. The turning point had arrived. Jessica reached Chloe, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She knelt, her gaze meeting her daughter's. Chloe, she whispered, her voice trembling, tell me everything. Don't leave anything out. And so, in hushed tones, amidst the stunned silence of the assembled guests, Chloe recounted the chilling conversation she had overheard, the chilling plan Robert had so carefully crafted. As she spoke, the murmurs amongst the guests intensified, the realization of Robert's deception rippling through the crowd like a shockwave. Robert, his carefully constructed facade crumbling, his face contorted with rage, tried to interrupt, to dismiss Chloe's words. Lies, he shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. She's making it up. But Jessica silenced him with a single, steely glance. Is that true, Robert? She asked, her voice cold and steady. Look me in the eye and tell me it's not true. He met her gaze, his eyes flickering with a mixture of anger and fear. The mask of charm had vanished, replaced by a raw, desperate vulnerability. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the soft sobs escaping Chloe's lips. The truth, raw and undeniable, hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the celebratory atmosphere that had filled the garden just moments before. I have proof, Chloe whispered, her voice barely audible, her hand trembling as she pulled a small, crumpled piece of paper from her pocket. I recorded him. The gasp that rippled through the crowd was audible, a collective intake of breath as the reality of Robert's deception settled in. He lunged towards Chloe, his face contorted with rage, but Michael intercepted him, his grip firm and unwavering. Don't even think about it, Clark, he warned, his voice low and dangerous. Two police officers, alerted by Michael earlier, stepped forward, their presence a calming force in the escalating chaos. Robert Clark, one of the officers said, his voice firm and unwavering, you're under arrest. As the officers led Robert away, his face a mask of disbelief and fury, Jessica turned to Chloe, her heart swelling with a mixture of relief and gratitude. Her daughter, her brave, unwavering daughter, had saved them both. The remaining guests dispersed quickly, their hushed whispers and shocked glances following Robert as he was escorted from the estate. The garden, once vibrant with anticipation, now felt desolate, a silent testament to the shattered dreams and exposed deceptions. Jessica, still clad in her wedding gown, now a symbol of a future averted, sank onto a nearby bench, her body trembling with exhaustion. Chloe, her small hand clutching Jessica's, sat beside her, her eyes wide and watchful. The fear had subsided, replaced by a quiet strength, the knowledge that she had done the right thing, no matter the cost. Michael joined them, his presence a comforting anchor in the swirling sea of emotions. He placed a comforting hand on Jessica's shoulder. You okay? He asked gently. Jessica nodded, her throat tight with emotion. Better now, she whispered, her voice hoarse. Thank God for Chloe. She looked at her daughter, her eyes filled with profound love and gratitude. You were so brave, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so proud of you. Chloe leaned against her mother, her small body trembling with exhaustion. I just wanted you to be safe, Mama, she whispered. Jessica held her close, the warmth of her daughter's small body a comforting presence against the lingering chill of Robert's betrayal. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the garden, Jessica felt a sense of peace settles over her. The wedding had been a disaster, but it had also been a revelation, a stripping away of the false to reveal the truth. In the weeks that followed, life slowly began to return to normal, although the echoes of Robert's deceit still lingered. Jessica, with Michael's continued support, navigated the legal aftermath, securing her assets and ensuring Robert's prosecution. The process was arduous, but it was also cathartic, a necessary step in reclaiming her life and her future. Chloe, no longer burdened by the weight of her secret, blossomed. The fear in her eyes had vanished, replaced by a newfound confidence and a quiet strength. The experience had transformed her, forging within her a resilience that would serve her well in the years to come. One warm afternoon, Jessica and Chloe returned to the garden, now restored to its former glory. The memory of the aborted wedding still hung in the air, a faint echo of the chaos and betrayal that had unfolded there. But the garden no longer felt like a place of shattered dreams. It felt like a place of renewal, a symbol of their resilience, their unbreakable bond. Chloe, her hand clasped tightly in Jessica's, looked up at her mother, her eyes bright and clear. "Mama," she asked, her voice filled with a quiet curiosity, "do you think we'll ever have another wedding here?" Jessica smiled, her gaze sweeping across the vibrant blossoms, the gently swaying trees, and the tranquil beauty of the restored garden. "Maybe someday," she replied, her voice soft and filled with hope. "But for now," she added, pulling Chloe close, "this is enough. We have each other. And that's all that matters." As the sun began to set, casting a warm golden glow across the garden, Jessica and Chloe sat in comfortable silence, their hands clasped together, their hearts filled with quiet joy. The fairy tale wedding had been a deception, a carefully crafted illusion. But the love between mother and daughter, forged in the crucible of betrayal and triumph, was real, unbreakable, and more precious than any fairy tale ending. They had faced the darkness together, and they had emerged stronger, more resilient, and more deeply connected than ever before. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Jessica knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her soul, that their story, their real story, was just beginning.